It's time for the Las Vegas Sportsline, brought to you by the Sunset Station with sports director Chuck Esposito. Presented by WagerTalk.com.
We are live from Club Madrid inside Sunset Station. I'm Dave Koch, and Chuck Esposito is here. Marco D'Angelo is here, and it's our Monday afternoon quarterback edition. We've got Golden Knights to talk about as well. We'll do that later in the show. Got a lot of games to go through, so why waste any time? Let's get right to it. We'll start talking about each game in rotation order. We'll talk a little bit about what took place on the field, what took place at the betting windows as well. And, Chuck, we'll start right off with a game that, and I think this was the common theme in the early games, the house did not do well. The players did well with this game as the Dolphins actually came on in the second half and made it interesting, but the Vikings took too much command early and then too much command late.
Yeah, I was going to say to start off with, yesterday was one of those days where early on you had, a lot of favorites that came in. The public did fairly well. We really needed the two underdogs in the afternoon and the Sunday night game, and you got all three to win, which really kind of changed the complexion of the day quite dramatically. But, yeah, that first game, I think you look at Minnesota, who really needed the win. Miami's still in it, but this was a game that you look at Miami, every game that they've won is in that last possession range. This was a tough spot, I thought, for them. Minnesota makes the change at offensive coordinator. They need a win badly here, and I thought they changed their game plan. They ran a lot better. Cousins seemed to play better, and it was a game they had to win, which was not a good game for us.
And we did see a change right away in offensive philosophy of the Vikings. Marco, they came out running the football in this game.
They did, but, to quote Dennis Green, passed away a few years ago, Miami, they are who we thought they are. That was the most counterfeit 7-6 team that we saw in the NFL this year, and they got exposed yesterday. In Minnesota, yes, the offensive game plan was different yesterday, so good for them, take some of the pressure off of Cousins. But when I look at Minnesota this season, they're like the schoolyard bully. They're beating up on the teams that they can beat up at home, but every time they step up in class. Let's see the new philosophy work against a step up in class, because for me, Miami was a step down.
I was a little surprised it took so long to make the offensive coordinator coaching change. I know that DeFilippo, a lot of people thought highly of him and thought he could move to the next level, but it was obvious that Mike Zimmer wanted to run the ball more, and he didn't. He fancied himself more of that Andy Reid, Matt Nagy, Sean McVay kind of offensive kind of guru, where he's going to be more creative, think outside the box. That's exactly the opposite of what type of coach Mike Zimmer is. So it took a while. They made the change. I thought even Cousins looked much more comfortable yesterday.
I think he's more of a system quarterback,
right.
Really.
And I think you look at them. They play at Detroit this week, which is a winnable game. They're a favorite in that game. You still don't know what Matt Stafford's status is for sure. And then Week 17, which is really it's kind of a weird dynamic, but they play at home against the Bears in a game that may mean nothing to the Bears. And guess what? If everything stays the way it is right now, Minnesota travels to Chicago wild card weekend to play in Soldier Field. So just something to think about over the next couple of weeks. But I think Minnesota kind of has that inside track for one of the two wild card spots in the NFC right now.
Not much to think about or talk about in this game, but we'll get through it anyway. The Raiders and Bengals. Driscoll is now a winning quarterback. He has his first W. It came against the Raiders, which it still counts. And the Bengals get a win, and they move on to the next week with nothing going for either team.
I thought it was a good spot for Cincy, as weird as that sounds. Not that they're a really good team, but you look at Oakland, who had played back-to-back really good games, had that win in there as well, had to travel across country, and they know coming up this week on Christmas Eve, they play at home against a division rival, the Denver Broncos, in the last game in the Oakland Coliseum. If that's not a game that team and Gruden, that Chucky wants to win that night and have circled, the atmosphere there is going to be crazy. I thought it was a good spot for Cincy. They did back Cincy again yesterday, so the bettors really are the guests, I should say. We're 2-0 out of the gate yesterday with two kind of easy wins.
Basically, Chuck, that was my analysis on my play yesterday for the
Cincinnati. I read your notes, Marco, before we came on. So.
And you know what? We know that the Raiders got to address the defensive side of the football. They need to address the offensive line, too. This is a record-setting year for the number of sacks that they've had. Carr had 5 more yesterday. They're already at the record with 2 more games to play.
It's funny, but now that they've played a little bit better, Gruden is now starting to call Carr a great quarterback again. And I think, right now they're slated to pick number 2. Arizona picks number 1. It is a very rich defensive draft. Maybe still some question marks at quarterback. Maybe he buys another year with Carr before Tua comes out, knowing that he still has some wiggle room there. But interesting to see what they ultimately do with Carr, but they have played a little bit better of late. But they've got a lot of cash and a lot of draft picks coming up in a fairly rich defensive draft.
And one more year someplace, and then they arrive in Las Vegas. We don't know where they'll play next year. Probably won't be Oakland. Tampa Bay goes into Baltimore, a game the Ravens had to have, and they did get. But, Chuck, they didn't get it by enough to satisfy the bettors.
It kind of fell right on that number
Yeah.
there. Kind of ping-ponged a little bit around 7.5, 8. I didn't think Tampa played bad. I thought actually
I thought they played well yesterday.
As good as that Baltimore defense is, they let Winston convert a lot of third and longs, which I was kind of surprised at yesterday. You look at Lamar Jackson, he's so one-dimensional, and he's running at a higher clip than any quarterback has in the last 10 years in the NFL. But with Edwards and Dixon, they seem to get the job done. They play good enough defense, and they run the ball. Jackson still, to me, is a major question mark. When you've got a team that has good linebackers and a good safety like San Diego does this week, where Derwin James can step up in the box and kind of shadow him, if he has to throw, I'm still waiting for that game to see what's going to happen. Yet I thought they would have run into a buzzsaw in Kansas City. They almost won that game. I think it's a similar situation in San Diego, where San Diego, where LA Chargers can score from anywhere on the field. Can Lamar Jackson do enough offensively in a game that gets a little high scoring? That's the big question mark, but they do sit right now as the number 6 seed in the AFC.
But, and not without getting too much into the handicapping of this week's game, Bosa is going to be he's going to be all over Jackson in this game. So this is a game that Marco is going to have to throw the ball and find a way to get it down the field, because
I don't think Bosa's going to be the guy to shadow him. I think it's going to be Derwin James, though. When
okay.
you've got an athletic
then
safety like that.
Bosa will be roaming around.
Right, but I think that's the key right there. When you have someone that can kind of move up and shadow him, who is athletic, and although Bosa's a phenomenal talent, he doesn't have the same foot speed that Lamar Jackson does.
No.
But I think you look at Derwin James, you're much more comparable then as far as speed goes. I think he's going to shadow him. We'll see how they do. But again, I thought the same thing would happen when they played Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, that they wouldn't be able to.
Kansas City's defense stinks. The Chargers' defense is good.
But I thought from an offensive standpoint that they'd be just more dominant offensively, and it'd be hard for San Diego, or I said it again, for the Chargers, I'm going to keep saying, to compete. But they were in that game, and they should have won that game.
They're a good football team.
Right.
We thought Kansas City would be able to score more points on Baltimore,
correct.
which they weren't able to do. By far and away, this will be the toughest defense that they faced so far. He has faced 5 garbage defenses so far. Let's see what he does this week when he faces a good defense and a team that's going to be totally focused, because the Chargers are in the race right now for the AFC West.
Right.
They got everything to play for. So this is going to be a tough test. You cannot keep winning in the NFL the way they're doing.
They have everything to play for, like you said, the Chargers, and you think about that AFC dynamic right now, that they're at home against a Raven team that we know is a little challenged offensively. Kansas City has to travel to Seattle and play on Sunday Night Football. They could easily flip-flop spots. And you talk about how dominant Kansas City's been in the AFC. They could go from a comfortable number 1 seed to the number 5 seed, not get that bye, not have everything go through Arrowhead, and have to play 3 playoff games on the road to possibly get to Atlanta if they lose on Sunday night.
The Indianapolis Colts, boy, are they rolling. I'm telling you, that division has changed so much from the start of the year. The Texans were terrible to start the year. The Colts were not good to start the year. Those teams are rolling. Tennessee's playing decent ball. The Colts were brilliant yesterday in completely shutting down the Cowboys. And bad spot or not for Dallas, this was still a really dominating performance by Indy.
Well, I think they're not in the playoffs right now, guys.
Nope.
But there's one team that nobody wants to play in the AFC, and that's the Colts. Because Andrew Luck didn't have a great game yesterday, but those linebackers can flat out play. Now that you have Mack healthy too, they can run the ball. They're a really good team.
Yeah.
It's funny when you talk about the AFC South, because last year, who was the dominant team? The Jags. And you kind of had 3 also-rans at that point. It's reversed now. You had that team go from first to worst, it's Jacksonville. The other 3 teams are all in the hunt. Tennessee's playing really well. I don't know why it took him 14 weeks to know that Derrick Henry is a stud. There was games he was getting 8, 10, 12 carries early on. I couldn't understand it. But you look at those 3 teams, they're all in it. You think about Baltimore having to play on the road at San Diego Saturday night, a game they could lose. If they lose that game, Indy's at home against the Giants. That line from below double digits is going to go above double digits, or to double digits, I should say. It's a tough spot, I think, for the Giants here. The Colts are a team nobody wants to play. The bettors were on them yesterday, and I think they'll be on them again this Sunday.
And, Marco, I think if you want to take one unit among the 32 NFL teams, one unit that I think has outperformed expectations more than any, it's the Colts defense.
Oh, absolutely. If you would have been locked away in a room yesterday, and I would have brought either one of you guys out, you didn't see any scores all day, and told you the line's 3 in this game, and somebody tossed a shutout, who are you going to put your money on?
Absolutely.
In that game? There's no way you're going to think that the Indy pulled the shutout, and it's amazing. And Andrew Luck, I mean, you can't be happier for the guy because we didn't know coming into this season what kind of season he was going to have. I think it's a combination, obviously, of them getting him back. The coaching change, huge. This is a team, like you said, I wouldn't want to play them.
They had that bad loss where they didn't go for the tie.
Yep.
They had that loss there. But you think about moving forward. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the Colts have more money right now, salary cap space, than any team in the NFL. You think about that. Luck back for another year, removed from the injury. They're a team that they go out and get a big play wide receiver to complement T.Y. Hilton, add some help to that defensive line, although it's very good. I mean, they're a team that moving forward is going to be someone that is going to be awfully tough, I think, over the next couple of years. They're young. They have 3 number 1 picks on the offensive line. You've got a running back in Mack. You've got T.Y. Hilton. Add that big wide receiver as well, and all that cap money. I think they're a dangerous team going forward.
The Bills picked up a win yesterday. They did not cover the spread, which made me happy because I took the Lions plus the points. Matt Prater, the GOAT in this game, look, he didn't kick it very well, let's put it that way, and the Lions ended up losing. Buffalo does pick up another win, and the Bills, they've got 6 wins now? Who thought that was going to happen?
I think they found a quarterback. I really do. He's able to run the ball more than what I think any of us thought he was that type of quarterback coming in. They need some help, too, at wide receiver. Yeah. I think this year you've got some big-time wideouts that are coming out. There's some big-time wideouts in free agency, I think, that can help them. But, they've played well at home. They've played well with Josh Allen. I think 5 of their 6 wins are with Josh Allen starting at quarterback. Once you get him, I think, some help, I think he's going to be a much better quarterback. It's always a tough place to play when the calendar gets to December. And Detroit kind of showed it yesterday. Prater's used to kicking indoors. He had to kick outdoors in not ideal conditions. But I think Buffalo very quietly has kind of overachieved this year to come up with 6 wins.
Yeah, Buffalo definitely, you got to have high hopes if you're a Buffalo fan. The flip side, if you're a Lions fan, this coaching change and what this team has done, you look at the last 2 weeks. They scored 17 points last week against Arizona. 7 of them came on a pick 6. And 13 points this week. You've got some serious offensive problems where before it was always they had offense, but they couldn't stop anybody. Now both sides of the ball is not impressive.
Don't forget they trade Golden Tate, who's their best wide receiver, and I think that offense changed pretty dramatically when Kerryon Johnson got hurt. We had talked about it, I think, maybe 6 weeks ago when he looked like, the back that when they drafted him, he would be their every down back, and I think he'll be a good back moving forward. Once he got hurt, though, and the trade of Golden Tate, that whole offense kind of changed. I don't think Stafford's 100%. Wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't play the last couple of weeks of the season, but that was a game that was, we kind of had two-way action on that game. It wasn't a huge decision for our side of the counter.
Yeah, and we wonder if Aaron Rodgers will play anymore this season. There's speculation that he won't. He did yesterday, put up the good fight, but the Bears just too strong for Green Bay. This game got very interesting late from a point spread perspective. Ends up with the Bears covering in their victory, and that disappointed some sentimental Green Bay Packers fans. How was the betting on this game?
It was two-way somewhat, but we did end up going into the game needing the Packers to cover. I think you look at the Bears, and I know we talked about it last week. Marco and I both thought the same thing, that this was a great spot for them to be flat after the big emotional prime-time dominating performance against the Rams, except against the Green Bay Packers. Any other team in the league, you'd say it's a good spot. Like, I think this week's a good spot for them to be flat. But they came out. They did what they had to do. They hadn't made the playoffs since 2010. Hadn't won the division since then. Hadn't beaten the Packers since 2010. Exercised a lot of demons. That Packer team has a lot of problems, though. And you looked at Rodgers on the Hail Mary before the half. You looked at him in the fourth quarter when he dropped down to one knee on multiple occasions. Yeah. He's definitely hurt. You're paying the guy as the highest-paid quarterback in the league. You look for a coaching change. They need some help at wide receiver as well. I wouldn't, you look at that number, too. You saw that number open up in some places, them over a field goal favorite. It's now 1.5 the other way.
I think the bettors are speculating already that Rodgers is not going to play.
And they're 0 for this year on the road. They're 0-7. A loss here puts them at 0-8